And I watched Breaking 2 in theaters and Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo. So I thought that was the real deal too. Then you get the
can't hate Breaking. Like Breaking was a moment.
I agree before even seeing any second of this film that I think that there is this idea of those classic Long Island rap and hip hop groups that people love them, people know them, people give them their credit, but it's not like saying this is Long Island. So what's most important about kind of getting that word out there to people?
With hip hop, it's very important where you're from. So I think maybe, it started out with this urban narrative in the Bronx and traveled out towards the suburbs, but I don't know if it was cool.
I would dovetail off of that. Like one of the most famous songs, "The Bridge Is Over," is KRS-One and Boogie Down Productions talking about the Bronx, and this is where hip hop originated, and they were dissing MC Shan in Queens. So that whole concept of where you're from defines you and defines your importance in hip hop, and Long Island just got kind of ignored and left behind. So it's one of the reasons why we wanted to make this film.
I mean, just as a hip hop fan, hip hop lover, and De La Soul is one of my favorite groups of all time, and just not being from Long Island, but hearing the constant references to Long Island, you just want to know where this place was. And I can relate being from Mount Vernon, being from Westchester County, where, people think you might be a little soft because you're not from the quote unquote the 5 boroughs, the city, right? But as we show in the film, it gets just as rough and tough in the outer boroughs and the 6th borough as it does in the 5 boroughs.
Everybody's going to give props to Rakim as far as being the god, but and of course all things will pass, but without him, people may not be flowing the way they do now, being offbeat, syllables crossed against different bars. And so the fact that nobody wants to say that was born out of a place that you don't realize is kind of weird.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Rakim to me is, as you just said, the godfather of just lyrical dexterity, right? Putting your syllables, but then making it catchy. When he steps out to the Apollo, singing, make him clap to this, the crowd is on their feet going nuts, going ape shit, excuse my French. But
by all means,
they're loving it. They're loving it. And that's a great point. Without Rakim, we don't have the artists that we have now, right? Expanding the art form the way they are. So he definitely deserves all the props that we can give him.
And there's a funny story about when Rakim recorded his first single. He did it in Queensbridge at Marley Marl's house. And, MC Shan, who worked with Marley at the time, and Marley, they basically thought Ra was too laid back and too smooth. He sat down while he recorded his vocals. And that to me is just indicative of Long Island. He's like, I'm chill, man. I got this. And they were the city guys like, come on, we need more rah-rah. And as a result, we got 2 of the best records ever made because of that laid-back style.
Yeah, they say that. They call it the slow flow.
Yeah.
And, rumor is that Craig Mack had it. And Biggie, was influenced a lot by Long Island because before that, if you listen to like Party and Bullshit, he was a little more, boom bat. And by the time his album came out, he was a little more on the smoother tip.
I was a Massapequa kid, and unfortunately, we were still, because the movie does point out the fact that like Long Island almost like segregated itself in a lot of ways into where there was, we had the one token black student in my school district, but Amityville's right there, Freeport's right there, and not that we can't cross over, but it felt like I was in a bubble, and like at the time, I knew groups, but I didn't even know they were from right around me. Are there things that you learned both about the island itself and the artists themselves that you didn't expect in getting ready to prepare the film?
I was in a bubble similar to your bubble. I lived in North Amityville, which was predominantly black. In the 80s and 90s was heavily affected by the crack epidemic. But when I went to school, my school was much more integrated.
Yeah.
When I went to the mall in Massapequa, which was Sunrise Mall, everybody went to that mall. But when I came back home, those, X amount of miles, I don't know the exact amount, all I saw was black folks. And I thought this was the world until I started to venture out. Interestingly, though, hip hop was all around. I used to see Prince Paul just around the neighborhood. Too Poetic, who later joined the Gravediggers, he lived 2 doors down. Dave from De La used to cut my hair. I used to record demos with Public Enemy's Professor Griff. So for me, Long Island and hip hop was synonymous. It was just around the neighborhood and around the town.
Did you learn anything else that you weren't expecting in preparing?
I mean, I wasn't expecting, not knowing much about the different communities in Long Island. I didn't know about the black belts that Chuck D talked about, right? I knew about white flight because that happens not just in Long Island, but across the country. But the way that communities, black communities from the 5 boroughs were specifically, moved to certain communities I didn't know about. And how Chuck really broke it down into these different belts was fascinating to me. And it made a lot of sense why a De La's from someplace like Amityville or Rise and Wyandanch, which before making this movie, I couldn't explain to you at all. I was just like, oh, it's just something weird.
I know all these artists have still love for where they grew up in a lot of ways. Do you find them having like those stories right off themselves, or they even have to think about it a little bit?
I mean, the greatest for me, and I didn't know Method was from Hempstead.
Yeah.
But when we talked about lacrosse, he went right back to it. He went right back into the team, the uniforms, how to make him feel, walking home from the Coliseum. So he went right back into it. Same with EPMD, Parrish. Not only being in Long Island, but then once they moved there, traveling back to the Bronx, Brooklyn, wherever, most of their family resided at the time. Chuck too, talking about the Mets and where he lived and then coming to Long Island, they go right back into those really influential and foundational childhood moments. So that was great all around.
Yeah, I thought it was very easy subject matter to talk about. People like talking about growing up, and I think most people had a positive experience growing up there for the most part, so. Again, so and a lot of stuff in the '80s that we talk about, riding bikes and playing in street hockey and basketball on the court and parties in the park, that kind of stuff.
What is it about the fact that there seems to be these like pockets where, whether it's just because friends are hanging out, that all of this brilliance just seems to like bubble up at like one time or another?
I mean, it's the beautiful thing about hip hop, to be really cliche, but just all those places you mentioned. Quite simply, it's just, guys, girls, everybody just getting together and saying, we like this art form. We liked what Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel and all those guys started in the Bronx, but this is our twist on it. The Bay Area sounds completely different, obviously, from what's coming out of New York. The South, when they went at the 95 Source Awards, right? Outkast, the South has something to say. The Midwest, Chicago, and all those cats. Canada, international, right? That's what I love about this art form. They all take it, make it their own, but still make it relatable to everybody else. And it all forms as one, beautiful community.
Once each one of these groups blew up, they kind of had a following underneath it. So EPMD made it, then there was the Hit Squad, which was K-Solo and
Keith Murray.
Das Effects.
Yeah, Das Effects. And then Eric had his thing going with the Def, and then Public Enemy had Leaders of the New School, so they kind of had people underneath them, and I think that kind of grew. And even Redman came out to Long Island to record a lot. So people were coming to where the talent was, I think.
When it comes to hip hop culture and film, if there were and we didn't notice until a certain time, and I was thinking of the idea of was it the fact that maybe Crush Groove was the real thing and Break-In was just my sheltered white boy version of stuff? And I'm curious, A, if that rings true around the world, and B, what are the hip-hop films out there, whether they be documentaries, features that just are in the world that people need to see that they don't watch enough?
Well, for me, it's a mix. It's doc and narrative, and I love this stuff. I mean, first for me, and big up to my dad who worked on Style Wars, documentary about rap and breakdancing, shows you that really early hip-hop culture, right? Then you got, to me, Wild Style, right? Charlie, what they did with that stuff. It's basically a musical. Right? And then, as you see with all kind of industries, once they see that successful, it's just the carbon copies. So that's when you get the Break-In. And I watched Break-In 2 in theaters and Break-In 2 Electric Boogaloo. So I thought that was the real deal, too. Then you get the
can't hate Break-In. Break-In was a moment.
Then Crush Groove was dope, too. Crush Groove was dope. The Fat Boys and, and All You Can Eat. Yeah. And it just, but that, for me personally, I don't know how Julie and Andrew feel. That's the elements to me, those films. And then, there's all the docs, the Hard Knock Life doc, Jay-Z's joint, and then some other docs that, so it just continued. But those are to me, the core texts that everybody should watch.
Yeah, I agree with Jason 1,000%. And I know this isn't an old doc, but to me, one of the most important docs made ever in hip hop is the Video Music Box doc. Okay. For a young man growing up in Long Island, in New York, I would run home to get to my television to watch Video Music Box. I mean, Ralph McDaniels was giving you a glimpse into what was going on in the city, in the nightclubs, in the culture. He had people that Yo MTV Raps and MTV would never feature, and that documentary was it did an incredible job at just showing what he did, how he did it with the limited resources, and it was amazing. It's
Crazy Sand too.
Yes, Video Music Box. I'm very happy that Nas and Mass Appeal made that happen because it's an incredible doc.
If you look also at two big films, Juice and Do the Right Thing. You know, Do the Right Thing, you think of Public Enemy, and Juice, you think of Rakim. So that's kind of how I learned about some of these guys from the movies, you know.
And then you mentioned Fat Boys. I forgot Disorderlies though. That was my life as a
That's
kid.
the jam right
that
there.
Was the best thing
But the
ever.
funny thing about Juice, you know, EPMD has a cameo in there with the whole Long Island connection.
They do.
Guys, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us,
Thanks
man.
again.
Take care.